Alright, so here's the video on the unit test that I've been working on. I just wanted to go over a lot of the work that I've done to give a little explanation as to what's going on here. So every module here has every component has a name, so background video, and then that has a JSX, and then the background video test. My goal is to have every component tested out. I have most of them tested out, as well as Redux tests, but there were a few components that I was having issues testing because of the new Redux implementation, so that's the last thing I need to work on, but I'm going to show you the most recent test. So I got Redux implemented, and here's all the actions, consignment parts stock, and this is where all the GET requests go to the server. So if we look here, this would be a fake response from the server, this big object here. It's big just so I could have data to mess around with. And then here, in the GET consignment parts, this would be the actual AJAX request of the server fetching that JSON object. And then based on the response you get, if it's a success, failure, or a 404, it'll run one of these actions, which then takes it down to the reducers. And so this is like consignment parts started calls the consignment parts started reducer. So let's go to consignment parts reducer, and then let's look for consignment parts started. Oh, there it is. So that reducer would end up calling this, or that action would end up calling this reducer, which would return loading as true, thus showing a loading screen. And that's kind of how the flow is the component will call the action will run against this request, and then it'll call a reducer, and then the reducer runs and does its magic. And so here's the test for all of those Redux reducer tests. Here I have user authentication reducer in the describe. So every test, every reducer is wrapped in its own describe block. And so this would be all the authentication user test, and it's making sure, should return initial state, should set loading true. And so we can do like a simple test here. If I go into the reducers consignment parts authentication, and I say error returns fleshlight and save it, that'll give us an error because the unit test is constraining this code saying that expected value to equal error, but instead we received fleshlight, and then it shows you the difference here. So error was null, but we received fleshlight, and kicks back the error. Redux unit test, user authentication reducer, login success, should loading. Should set loading to false and set the user, expectation, etc. And then it gives you the one test failed. And so that way, if anybody messes with the code in the future, you can find a break in the build. Somebody might edit this and might have like an artifact side effect kind of thing where they're fixing their module and it breaks an older module. This is to prevent that. And let me go ahead and remove that. And yeah, this goes for every reducer. I've got all of them tested, so these are all working perfectly. If we were to put, say, products is equal to 1, that's going to break something. So here, action.payload.products would be the JSON data that we got from the server being passed into this product selection gallery success. And here we're setting it to 1, and it's expecting an object. And so here's the object that it is expecting. Here's what we got. And it gives you a ton of good information. So if something breaks in the future, you can track it very quickly just by running npm test. Boom. So it's going to run through all the tests, and boom, our thing's broken. So let's go ahead and delete that and fix that. Run our tests again. And so here I'm going to press run all tests. So this is going through all of the tests, which is 217 tests passed with 22 suites. And boom, everything's working. Or you can run npm test, and it'll run through all of them by default. And then you get a couple little options too, like only run failed tests. You can type in a regex pattern to run like product selection gallery reducer test only, etc. So let's run all. And excuse me. Where's our test? Boom, boom, boom. Reducers, Redux test. And then down here it's the recent order reducer, and this is fake object for that, and then all the use cases for recent order. These are all the possible things you can do with recent order. Let's make this bigger. Where did recent order go? So filter recent order by start end date. Expect recent order reducer. Wait, no. Should filter recent order by start end date. Should return initial action state without action. Those are the two things that this test can do, and we're testing for both cases. And so I basically went down. If we look at the, like, for instance, is it recent orders? Yeah, this one's pretty big. You've got filter recent order by start end date, which has basically one result. There either is or there isn't. Filter recent order by status. This can return a filtered order, or this can return nothing. So each one of these has like a multitude of things that it can return, and the unit tests are testing for each one of those use cases. So let's say you filter order by order status, and you have a match, you'll get this response, and it's testing for that. And then I'm also testing for when it doesn't. So let's check these out. Boom. There's that. Let's go to test, search, filter recent order by order status. So here's the different possible things you can do with that. Should filter order when the order status exists, and we're setting the order status at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we look up here in our object, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so the order status down here for this one, object number 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here it is right here. Expect recent order. So we're setting that. We're calling the reducer is doing stuff, and we're expecting the output to be valid. And then should not filter orders when order status exists. It should, and it's going through every possible case that order can have. Filter items by order items. These are the two possible outcomes, and it's testing for both. So the reducers are all unit tested out. Most of the modules are unit tested out. The only thing that I haven't been able to unit test out so far is anything that came once I installed Redux. Let me see, recent orders table. So if I get a component that has no Redux dependency, I can unit test it. But right now I'm having issues with this right here. When you use Redux with React.js, React.js is sending a lot of that business logic into the Redux environment, and Redux is handling it. So a lot of these functions that would normally be attached to this component up here in a method are now outside of the method in Redux. And so when I try to test them, I have not been able to figure out how to get a test to run properly. So that's what I'm working on right now, is figuring out how to properly unit test a component that has been connected to Redux. But other than that, everything's tested out. And this is the last couple components that I've just created that I haven't been able to do. But there's my progress report. I'll be sending this in a little shortly. Have a good one.